I'll be blocking one rear tire as I'll be lifting the front of the car for this 2019 Jeep Cherokee brake job. If you're not familiar on how to lift the front end of a Jeep Grand Cherokee, I'll put a link in the upper right. You'll find links in the description to everything you need. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the wheels using a 22mm deep socket and an air impact wrench. I will be recording on the right-hand side of the car, although the process is the same when you work on the left front wheel. With all 5 lug nuts removed, we can roll that tire out of the way. And now the first thing we're going to do is, using a large flathead screwdriver, we're going to pop off that anti-rattle clip so we can gain access to the brake pads. With that clip removed, the next thing I'm going to do is take a picking tool, and there's a dust cap over the guide pins for the caliper in the upper and lower positions. So you can see me just popping those off. Now you will need an 11mm hex bit socket driver. A 7/16 will also work, but if you don't have these already, go out and pick these up before you start this project. Now sometimes I leave the top guide pin in and I just remove the bottom guide pin so that I can just kind of swing the caliper open. However, my brake pads were kind of corroded and I need to actually break them free. So I decided to just remove the guide pins altogether so I could just completely remove that caliper. Now, as is usually the case when you're changing old brake pads, the pistons are fully extended because the brake pads are so thin. So I'm using a flathead screwdriver and I'm just gently pushing in through the caliper to push in that piston so I can slide that caliper and brake pads off the rotor. Now, I did buy this car used for my daughter. It is in great shape, but here is a perfect example of what happens when you do not apply brake pad and caliper grease to the new brake pads. I had to really hit these things to get them out. Luckily, the rotors are in pretty good shape, so I'm just using a wire brush to remove some of the loose dust and rust before I install the new brake pads. Now, I chose to install some Bendix ceramic front brake pads on this Jeep Grand Cherokee. I will be comparing them to the old ones to make sure there's a good fit, but I will tell you that these came highly rated and they were at a good price on Amazon. Again, I'll put a link in the description as to where you can get all of these parts. Occasionally, I do get the wrong parts by mistake, so just take a couple of minutes to make sure your parts are an exact match. After spraying down the rotor and the caliper with brake cleaner, I am applying a healthy dose of brake and caliper grease to the points where the brake pad makes contact. Okay, now I do need to push the pistons back into the caliper, so what I'm going to do is hang the caliper using a metal hanger, and I'm going to hang it by one of the coil springs. Then I'm going to use one of the old brake pads, and I'm actually going to push it back onto the pistons. See there, you can see me fitting it in there. Now, next I'm going to take an old C-clamp I keep around for doing brakes, and I'm going to very gently and very slowly tighten that C-clamp and push those pistons in slowly back into the caliper so that they're flush. That gives me the room I need to install those brand new brake pads. With the pistons pushed in, I am ready to install those brake pads, but as I said before, I don't want to have to hammer on these brake pads in 6 months to a year in order to get them off, so I'm applying ample brake and caliper grease both to the back side that will be making contact with those pistons, as well as the edges that will be resting on that caliper. By having all of this greased, the brake pads will move the way they should around that rotor, and when I do need to change them in the future, they should come out a lot more easily. I will say I really like the brake pads that have these metal tabs so that when you push them onto the piston, the brake pads actually kind of hold on to that piston on the inside caliper. Then I just need to worry about that outside brake pad while I'm installing the caliper. Here you can see I am applying ample brake and caliper grease to the outside as well as those tabs so that this brake pad slides nicely once it's mounted in the caliper. And of course, down the road, having lubricated the brake pad upon installation, it should be a lot easier to remove when I need to change the brake pads in the future. Now with that outside brake pad in place, I can now remove the hanger I was using to secure that caliper, and I can go ahead and slide it into place. Before I install the caliper guide pins, I am going to apply some BTAS copper anti-seize lubricant to the threads. Because brakes can get hot, I don't want to risk having these guide pins seize, causing me a real headache in the future. So this is a great compound available on Amazon. You should use it not only on your caliper guide pins, but I'm also going to apply it to the bolts before I put the lug nuts back on. So with both guide pins lubricated, I am going to press them through the back side of that caliper. Then I will slide that caliper over the rotor, and then I will push them in, then again using that 11 millimeter hex bit socket, or again that 7/16. Using a socket wrench, I'm going to snug all these down before pulling out my torque wrench and torquing both the upper and the lower guide pin to about 40 foot-pounds. We are ready to install our anti-rattle clip, and I like to put a pair of gloves on because you're kind of going to be bending that metal. I put the upper corner in first, then I'll try and work that bottom section in. And again, you can pinch your fingers pretty easily with these clips, so I like to just wear a pair of gloves while I do it. Before we put the wheel back on, I always like to add a little BTAS anti-seize copper lubricant to all of the threads before I put all those lug nuts on. So once I grease those up really good, it'll be safe to get the wheel off in the future. I can still set torque to about 120 foot-pounds. But before I forget, let's be sure to put those dust caps back on to protect those guide pins. Once I get the wheel back on, again, I will be using 22 millimeter deep sockets on my air tool to put this right wheel back on. Then you can repeat the process exactly the same on the left-hand side, and you will have completed the front brake job on your Jeep Grand Cherokee. I'll be sure to post all the parts I used. Let me know if you've got any questions. Thanks for watching. Check out the description for more information and hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more videos.